What is up, explainers, and welcome back. We have all met them. Those people who seem to live inside a storm of their own making, and they seem absolutely determined to pull you right into the middle of the chaos with them. It feels personal, it's draining, and honestly, it can feel completely hopeless. But what if I told you it's not random at all?
Right? You try arguing with facts, but they just twist everything around. You try to explain your feelings, and they somehow use that against you. It's maddening. Well, what if this isn't just bad luck? What if it's a predictable pattern of behavior that once you see it, you can totally change the game? And hey, speaking of changing the game, if you want to master more deep dives like this one, do me a favor and smash that like button, subscribe, and let me know in the comments who you want us to explain next.
All right, so here's our game plan for today. First, we are going to pull back the curtain on the hidden pattern that's driving all this chaos. Then, we're going to meet the 5 key personalities you absolutely need to recognize. After that, we'll expose the sneaky psychological trap they use to get inside your head, show you how you might be accidentally fueling the fire, and finally, the best part, we're going to arm you with a complete conflict survival kit. Okay, let's dive right in. The core idea here comes from the incredible work of Bill Eddy. We're talking about a very specific type of person he calls a high conflict person, or an HCP for short. And let me be clear, these aren't just difficult people. Oh no, they operate on a whole different level. So here's the absolute crucial point, the one thing you have to get. When a problem comes up, most of us, we look for a solution, right? An HCP, they look for a person to blame. It's not about them being evil or anything like that. It's a deeply ingrained, super rigid defense mechanism. Their entire world narrows down to finding and attacking a single target of blame, making that person the source of all their problems. This means they have almost zero ability for self-reflection or taking any kind of responsibility.
So these 4 behaviors, they all combine to create this perfect storm of conflict. First up is all or nothing thinking. In their world, you are either a perfect angel sent from heaven or you are the devil incarnate. There is absolutely no in-between. Second, you've got unmanaged emotions. Their reactions are often sudden, crazy intense, and just completely out of proportion to what's actually happening. Third, there's a profound lack of empathy. They just can't or won't see things from your point of view. And all of that leads to number 4, extreme behavior. We're talking anything from floods of abusive emails to completely baseless lawsuits. Now, that general pattern of behavior, it doesn't just look one way. It actually shows up in 5 distinct personalities. And trust me, recognizing which one you're dealing with is critical because each of them has its own unique and very special way of blowing things up. So let's break down these 5 faces of conflict. First, you've got the narcissistic type. Their whole life is driven by a deep fear of being seen as inferior, so their go-to move is to constantly devalue you to make themselves feel big. Then there's the borderline type, terrified of abandonment, which creates that exhausting I love you, now I hate you whiplash. The antisocial type, that's your classic con artist, breaking rules and using deceit to get power or money. Then you have the paranoid type, who sees conspiracies around every corner and will attack you first just because they're suspicious. And finally, the histrionic type. They need to be the center of attention, so they are masters at creating huge crises just so they can star in the drama, usually as the victim. And let's make no mistake about this. Dealing with an HCP isn't just a little bit annoying. It is genuinely destructive. We are talking about financial ruin from never-ending legal fights, serious emotional and psychological harm that can lead to chronic stress, anxiety, even PTSD. We're talking about massive reputational damage from their smear campaigns, and you know what? You just start making terrible decisions because you are completely and utterly exhausted. This brings us to what might just be the most important part of this entire explainer, the psychological trap they set for you. It's so subtle, it's incredibly powerful, and it all starts with some early warning signs that you might have missed. Think back to your first few interactions. You gotta listen really carefully. Do they have a long history where every single person, every ex-partner, every old boss, every former friend was somehow the problem? Do they talk about people in these extreme terms, like they were either a perfect angel or pure evil? Is there just this endless revolving door of complaints that never gets solved? These are not just little quirks, okay? These are giant, flashing, neon red flags that you are dealing with someone who pushes all blame onto others. And here it is. This is the trap. It's called the 90% rule. In any given conflict with a high conflict person, 90% of the actual problem is their rigid blaming behavior. But, and this is the genius of the trap,
Their attacks are so personal, so vicious, that they trick your brain into focusing 90% of its energy on the tiny, tiny 10% you might have contributed. You spend hours, days, weeks just torturing yourself, asking, what did I do? How could I have said that differently? Was it my fault? I want you to look at this. This is the objective reality of the situation. The huge, overwhelming majority of the problem, the real engine driving all the chaos, is their high conflict behavior. Your part in it, it's that tiny little slice, at best. But this is what happens inside your head. See how it's completely flipped? You obsess over your little 10%. You defend it, you analyze it, you lose sleep over it. And that leaves you with almost no mental energy to deal with the actual 90% of the problem, which is their behavior. This is exactly where they want you, completely distracted, on the defensive, and totally worn out. So the single most powerful thing you can do is to consciously shift your focus. You have to stop asking, what did I do wrong, and start asking, how do I manage this predictable pattern of behavior? Just that one little shift in perspective, it moves you from being their victim to being the manager of the situation. It is how you take your power back. No, here's a tough pill to swallow, but it's a critical truth. A lot of the time, the very things we do with the best intentions, trying to be reasonable, trying to be empathetic, are the exact things that pour gasoline on the fire. In fact, people are often targeted because of their strengths, like their empathy or their desire to help.
And it all follows a predictable cycle. It kicks off with the idealization phase. They put you way up on a pedestal. You're the only one who gets them. You're the perfect boss, the perfect friend, the perfect partner. But then comes stage 2. You set a boundary. Maybe it's a small one. You just say no to something, you disagree with them, or you simply can't meet some impossible demand. Well, that's the trigger. And instantly, you are flipped into the devaluation phase. You are no longer the savior. You are now the ultimate evil enemy, their new target of blame.
So the first mistake pretty much all of us make is trying to argue with facts and logic. We think, look, if I can just explain it clearly enough, they'll see the light, they'll understand. But it fails. Every single time. And why is that? Because they are not interested in the truth. They're interested in the conflict. Your well-reasoned logical arguments, that's just a form of negative attention. And to them, that's the fuel they crave. Okay, common mistake number 2 is opening up and expressing your hurt. You say something like, it really hurt my feelings when you did that. You're hoping for a moment of connection, of empathy. But because they lack that empathy chip, they don't see your pain. They see a weakness. Your vulnerability becomes a weapon, ammunition that they can and absolutely will use against you later to prove how unstable or oversensitive you are. And the third big mistake brings us right back to that 90% mind trap, blaming yourself. The moment you start apologizing for things that aren't actually your fault, you are validating their completely twisted version of reality. You're basically agreeing with them that, yeah, you are the problem. And this doesn't calm them down. No, it does the opposite. It energizes them and encourages them to attack you even more. Okay, we've laid it all out. We've identified the problem, we've met the players, and we've seen the traps. So now it's time for the solution. Let's build your survival kit with some concrete, practical strategies that take all the emotional fuel out of these interactions and put you firmly back in the driver's seat. The absolute cornerstone of your new defense system is something called the BIFF model for communication. From now on, your responses to them, especially in writing, like emails or texts, should always be brief, informative, friendly, and firm. BIFF. Brief, so there's less surface area for them to attack. Informative, giving only neutral, necessary facts, no opinions, no emotions. Friendly, to keep the tone respectful and avoid giving them any ammo to call you hostile. And finally, firm, so the conversation has a clear endpoint. Let's look at a perfect example of this in action. Instead of an emotional, blaming response like, "You are always late and I'm so sick of waiting for you," you use BIFF. "I will wait until 5 p.m. If you have not arrived by then, I will leave the key under the planter." See? It's brief. It's informative, just the facts. The tone is totally neutral and friendly enough, and it's firm. It ends the conversation and offers them absolutely nothing to argue with. There's no fuel there for a fight. So, to wrap up your entire survival strategy, it really comes down to these 4 core pillars. Number 1, identify the pattern so you know exactly what you're dealing with and you don't take it personally. Number 2, manage all communication using that BIFF model. Keep it short, factual, and firm. Number 3, set firm, clear boundaries, not on their feelings, but on their behavior. Things like, if you continue to yell, I'm going to end this phone call. And number 4, do not be afraid to get professional backup, whether that's a lawyer, someone in HR, or a therapist who really understands these dynamics. Because remember, you can't change them, but you can absolutely 100% change how you react. And that, my friends, changes the entire game. And speaking of changing the game, don't go anywhere. The rest of the powerful insights are coming right up.
All right, let's jump right in. We are about to unpack the actual playbook used by narcissistic, high-conflict people. And let's be really clear here. These aren't just random bad moods or difficult behaviors. Oh no. These are specific, predictable, and frankly, devastatingly effective tactics designed for one thing: to manipulate and control. Understanding this playbook is the absolute first step you have to take to recognize what's happening and ultimately to protect yourself.
So where does it all begin? Almost always, it starts with something called love bombing. And this is not genuine affection, not even close. It's a highly calculated strategy. Think of it like a shock and awe campaign at the start of a relationship. They will absolutely overwhelm you with praise, with attention, with gifts. You are made to feel like you're the most special, perfect, and understood person on the entire planet. And the goal here is twofold. First, to create this incredibly intense and rapid dependency on them. And second, to build this flawless, fairy tale image of the relationship that later on you will desperately try to get back to.
And this lays out the core cycle of their behavior perfectly. It is a brutal, dizzying two-step. First, you have idealization. That's the "you're perfect" phase, right? It's fueled by all that love bombing we just talked about. But once you're hooked, once they feel like they've got you, that switch flips. And I mean, it flips in an instant to devaluation. All of a sudden, the person who could do no wrong can do absolutely nothing right. And this emotional whiplash, it is 100% intentional. It's designed to keep you confused, off balance, and always trying to get back to that perfect phase, which, of course, gives them all the power.
So how exactly do they start to devalue you? Well, they've got a whole toolkit for it. This isn't just them having a bad day. It is a systematic process of breaking a person down. We're talking constant nitpicking criticism that just erodes your confidence. We're talking sophisticated psychological manipulation, like gaslighting. They will lie with a completely straight face, twist facts to fit whatever story they're telling, and even attack your reputation to try and isolate you. And in really high conflict situations, they will weaponize formal systems, like the courts, not to get justice, but just as another tool of abuse.
Okay, let's zoom in on gaslighting for a second, because this is one of their most insidious and destructive tools. This is a deliberate attempt to make you doubt your own reality. They will flat out deny saying something you clearly remember them saying. They'll look you right in the eye and insist, "I never said that, you're making things up again." Or they'll invalidate your perfectly normal emotions, saying things like, "You're just being way too sensitive," or "That's not how it happened at all." And over time, the goal is to just chip away at your sanity until you start to feel like you're the one who's going crazy, not them. And this is the crucial part. When you're dealing with a narcissistic high-conflict person, you have to completely flip your thinking about their motivation. When they drag you into formal systems, like filing lawsuit after lawsuit, their main goal often isn't to win the case. It's to punish you. The process itself becomes the weapon. It's about draining your bank account, exhausting you emotionally, and just making your life a living hell. For them, victory isn't a piece of paper from a judge. Victory is your suffering. Okay, so we've seen what they do, right? The love bombing, the devaluation, the gaslighting, we've seen the playbook. But to really get a handle on this, we have to ask the much deeper, much more important question, why? Why on earth would anyone behave like this? Well, the answer isn't in their perceived strength. It's in an unbelievably fragile and terrified psychological core. This slide just illustrates this central paradox perfectly. On the outside, what do you see? You see this massive facade of superiority, this breathtaking sense of entitlement, this bold grandiosity. They act like they're flawless, special, more important than anyone else. But all of that, it's just a carefully constructed suit of armor. And what is it protecting? It's protecting an internal reality of profound weakness, unimaginable fragility, and this deep-seated, terrifying fear. And this is it. This is the engine that drives everything. At their absolute core is a terrifying, all-consuming dread of being exposed as worthless, insignificant, or incompetent. Any criticism, any mistake, any tiny hint that they are not perfect, it triggers this existential panic in them. Their entire personality, every single action they take, is structured to avoid feeling this one single thing at all costs.
So how do they keep that incredibly fragile ego from just completely collapsing? Well, they need something called narcissistic supply. Think of it literally as emotional fuel. It is a constant stream of admiration, attention, and validation that they absolutely require from other people just to feel okay. They're like a fancy car with no engine of its own. They can only run on external fuel. And without that constant supply, their whole sense of self begins to crumble, which can lead to a total narcissistic collapse or, you guessed it, an explosive and terrifying narcissistic rage.
This brings us to their #1 psychological weapon for survival. Because they absolutely cannot tolerate any negative feelings about themselves, they have to put those feelings somewhere else. They have to export them. This defensive maneuver is the engine of all their blame, and it's a little thing called projection.
And the process is just remarkably consistent. It works like this. Step 1. The narcissist feels a negative emotion, maybe a flash of shame, a sense of guilt, the sting of feeling incompetent. Step 2. Because of that core fear we just talked about, they cannot handle that feeling for a single second. It's just too threatening. So, step 3. They immediately and aggressively export it. They accuse their target of having the exact flaw they just felt in themselves. So, if they feel incompetent, boom, you're the incompetent one. If they feel shame, they will immediately do something to make you feel ashamed.
And this is the devastating result of all that projection. The person they're blaming isn't just a random punching bag. They become a psychological container. The narcissist literally unloads all of their own unwanted feelings, their shame, their inadequacies, their failures, onto this person. Then, by attacking the target for these supposed flaws, they get a moment of temporary relief and can restore their own fragile sense of superiority. They feel clean because they've made you dirty with their own emotional garbage.
Now, you might be thinking, okay, so are all difficult, high-conflict people just lumped together in one basket? Are they all driven by the same things? The answer is a huge, definitive no. And knowing the difference is actually the key to understanding their wildly different motivations.
And this table just breaks down the core drivers so clearly. For the narcissistic high-conflict person, like we've been talking about, the dominant fear is being seen as worthless or inferior. Every single thing they do is about proving they are superior. But for someone with a borderline personality, the core fear is totally different. It's a frantic, intense fear of abandonment. And then you have the antisocial personality, where there often isn't a core fear at all. Their motivation is more about seeking power, stimulation, or just personal gain. And this distinction is so critical. A narcissist attacks to feel big, while a borderline personality might lash out because they're terrified you're going to leave them. So now we've dissected the playbook piece by piece, and we've peered into that fragile psychological core that drives all this destructive behavior. We get the what and we get the why. But the most critical question is still hanging in the air. What in the world do you do about it? How can you protect yourself without just fueling the fire? Don't you go anywhere. The powerful practical strategies to manage these interactions are coming right up.
Today, we are diving deep into the turbulent world of the borderline high conflict personality, or HCP. You know the pattern. It's this intense, dizzying cycle of I love you one minute and I hate you the next. We're going to break down exactly what drives this, why it's happening, and most importantly, how to navigate it. So here's our roadmap. First, we'll look at those baffling behaviors you see on the surface. Then we're going to peel back the layers and uncover the deep psychological reasons behind them. And finally, we'll get into some powerful, concrete strategies for managing these incredibly challenging relationships. All right, let's get right into it. Okay, section 1. This is all about the what, the confusing, and let's be honest, often painful behaviors that really define this pattern. This is what it looks and feels like when you're caught in this dynamic. This quote just nails it, doesn't it? It's not a slow, gradual cooling off in a relationship. No, it's a sudden, jarring switch that flips out of nowhere. It leaves you feeling this constant sense of emotional whiplash because you truly never know which version of the person you're going to get from one moment to the next. So this really shows you the two extreme poles of the relationship. In the beginning, you've got idealization. You are put on this giant pedestal, you can do no wrong, you are the answer to all their problems. But here's the thing, that's impossible to maintain. The second you do something human, like set a boundary or just disappoint them in some small way, bam, the switch flips to devaluation. And suddenly, you can do no right. You become the source of all their pain. And we need to be clear, these are not just arguments. These are specific tactics, and they're often totally unconscious, all designed to manage their overwhelming internal pain and to control the situation. The verbal attacks can be absolutely shocking. Spreading rumors? That's a way to paint you as the villain to justify their own feelings. And critically, those threats of self-harm, which come from a place of real pain, often function as this last-ditch, desperate effort to keep you from leaving. Okay, so now that we've seen what's happening on the outside, let's talk about what's going on inside. To really get why this crazy cycle happens, we have to go deeper into the core programming that's driving all of it. This is the internal logic behind that emotional storm. Everything, and I mean everything, starts right here, with the fear of abandonment. And look, this isn't just a simple worry about being lonely. This is a primal, paralyzing terror of being left. It's this core belief that they are fundamentally unworthy and will inevitably be abandoned. That fear is the lens through which they see the entire world, and it colors every single interaction they have. Because there isn't that stable sense of self, they often feel this chronic, gnawing emptiness inside. Their identity can feel like a chameleon, you know? It just changes based on who they're with. This is exactly why it can feel like you're dealing with a completely different person from one day to the next. Their internal compass is just constantly spinning, desperately trying to find a true north. This image of a switch is the perfect way to understand the core mechanism here. It's called splitting. This is the psychological defense that powers that whole I love you, I hate you cycle. See, their emotional system literally can't hold two opposing ideas at once, like the idea that you can be a good person who also makes mistakes. So to protect themselves from the anxiety of that gray area, their mind just sorts you into one of two boxes, perfect angel or evil demon. There is no in between. Okay, so now let's connect the dots. We've seen the internal feelings, that intense fear, the emptiness, the splitting, and we've seen the external actions. This is where we see how they all lock together to create this tragic, repeating, and seemingly inescapable loop. And this, right here, is the heartbreaking paradox of the whole pattern. The very actions they take to stop their greatest fear from coming true are what ultimately cause it to happen. It's wild. They might cling so tightly that their partner feels suffocated and has to pull away for air. Or they launch these preemptive attacks to test their partner's loyalty, which, of course, eventually drives them away. It is a truly devastating, self-fulfilling prophecy. This brings us to a really critical insight. Now, while the attacks feel intensely personal, and they are often a desperate, misguided attempt to manage unbearable internal pain. Now, that is not an excuse for the behavior, not at all, but it is a crucial piece of the explanation. They're basically externalizing their internal agony, and you just happen to be the target. So understanding all this is one thing, right? But how do you actually respond in these high conflict moments without just making everything worse? Well, this section gives you a concrete and really powerful communication tool designed specifically for these emotionally charged situations. The EAR model is a total game changer. Let's break it down. Empathy is the key. You are not agreeing with their accusations. So if they're yelling, "You're trying to destroy me," you don't argue that fact. You validate the feeling underneath it. You say, "I can hear how hurt you must be right now." That simple act gives them the emotional validation they're so desperately craving, and that can calm their fear and de-escalate the whole situation. So why does this work when logic doesn't? Well, because in those moments, you are not dealing with a logical part of their brain. You're dealing with raw, intense, survival-level emotion. That fear of abandonment has literally hijacked their rational mind. Chinese logic and facts will just feel like another attack to them. EAR bypasses the argument and speaks directly to that terrified emotional core, which is the only way you're going to be heard. And finally, and this is probably the most important part, let's talk about the strategies you need to maintain your own stability and your own safety. These communication tools are great, but they have to be paired with strong boundaries for your own self-preservation. The big takeaway here is that your consistency becomes their external anchor. Their internal world is total chaos, so your predictable, calm presence can be incredibly stabilizing for them. When you refuse to get swept up into the drama, when you don't yell back or break down crying, you stop fueling that destructive cycle. And setting firm limits, especially around threats, isn't about punishing them. It's about protecting yourself and modeling what healthy behavior actually looks like. This table just brilliantly summarizes our entire journey here. The core driver is that intense fear of abandonment. This fear then activates the psychological mechanism of splitting, which creates that all good, all bad dynamic. In the heat of the moment, you can use the communication tool of the EAR model to de-escalate. And the long-term antidote to all the chaos? It's your unwavering consistency with boundaries and your behavior. Don't go anywhere. The rest of the powerful insights are coming right up.
So, let's just get right into it. We've all heard the horror stories, right? These master manipulators who can just waltz into someone's life and leave total devastation in their wake, often with a smile. But how? How does the cruel con artist actually pull it off? What's their playbook?
Well, it almost always starts with what you could call a charm offensive. And I'm not just talking about being friendly. No, this is next-level stuff. We're talking about a magnetic, incredibly articulate personality. They have this uncanny ability to make you feel like you are the only person in the world, forging this super intense connection at warp speed. And that's the whole point, because that charm, it's not real. It's a key they've crafted to unlock everything they want from you. Access to your life, your power, your relationships, and yeah, especially your money.
And that right there brings us to their main event. Look, the emotional damage they inflict is absolutely catastrophic, but the most common bullseye for their attacks is financial. Their number one motivation is usually cold, hard cash and all the power that comes with it.
And the ways they go about it are just wow. This isn't just petty theft we're talking about. These people are virtuosos of financial ruin. They build these elaborate Ponzi schemes that can wipe out a person's entire life savings. They'll forge official documents without blinking. Outright theft, of course. They'll drain your bank accounts, max out your credit cards, and misuse your personal info until you are left completely broke, just sitting in a pile of rubble wondering what on earth just happened.
So you'd think, okay, people who have such a blatant disregard for the law must be terrified of it, right? Nope. And this is where it gets truly wild. They don't see the legal system as a source of justice. For them, it's just another weapon in their arsenal. And here's the huge disconnect. For you and me, for society, the law is supposed to be a shield, right? It's there to provide order and protect people. But for the con artist, it's a sword. They become masters at using it to protect themselves. Like, they'll rack up insane debts destroying someone and then just file for bankruptcy to wipe the slate clean. And even crazier, they use it to attack, burying their victims in these frivolous, soul-crushing lawsuits designed to bleed them dry of any money they might have left.
But the wreckage they leave behind isn't just financial. Let's shift gears and talk about what happens when they get into personal relationships, because this is where the cruelty takes on a whole new, deeply painful dimension.
You know, their relationships follow this chillingly predictable pattern. It always starts with that same over-the-top intense charm, a total whirlwind romance. But that's just phase one. Phase two is exploitation. The partner becomes a resource, someone to be used for money, a place to live, or just emotional validation. And then, once that resource is all tapped out, or hey, maybe a better one comes along, they hit phase three, the abrupt discard. They will abandon their partner with absolutely zero remorse. We're talking disappearing overnight as if the entire relationship just never happened.
And it gets even darker when kids are in the picture. For this personality type, there is no real, genuine emotional bond. Children are often seen as nothing more than pawns on a chessboard, tools they can use to torment an ex-partner during a custody battle, or maybe leverage to get a financial advantage. It's truly chilling.
Okay, so this brings up a really obvious question, right? What about consequences? I mean, surely getting fired from a job, being publicly humiliated, even going to jail, that's got to teach them a lesson, doesn't it?
The hard truth, according to all the research, is nope, not at all. Punishment, the threat of punishment, negative consequences, it has basically zero deterrent effect on their behavior. They just don't learn from it the way most of us do.
And the reason why is this profound psychological disconnect. They are completely emotionally detached from the consequences of their actions. The fear of prison, the shame of getting caught, the incredible pain they cause other people, all the stuff that keeps most of us on the straight and narrow, it just doesn't register for them. It's like trying to scare a brick wall with a ghost story. It's just not going to work.
So this leads us to the biggest question of all. If it's not the fear of getting caught, and it's not a deep-seated need for love or admiration, then what in the world is actually driving them to be this way?
Okay, so this is a super important distinction to make. Other challenging personalities, right? They're often driven by these really deep-seated emotional needs, like a terrifying fear of being abandoned, or a fragile ego that is desperate for admiration. But the antisocial con artist, totally different ballgame. Their motivations are chillingly simple, concrete, and instrumental.
The drivers are things you can literally touch and measure. They want money. They want stuff. Cars, houses, you name it. They want power and absolute control over other people. And there's one more piece here that we absolutely cannot forget. They get a thrill from the game itself. Successfully manipulating someone is for them the ultimate proof of their own power and superiority.
Now this next part might be the hardest thing to wrap your head around. They have a profound lack of insight because, put simply, they don't have a conscience. They genuinely do not see what they're doing as wrong. It's like their internal operating system is just missing the entire module for morality. It was never installed in the first place.
So their internal logic is brutally simple and completely self-serving. It really just boils down to this. If I can do something to get what I want, if I can lie or cheat or steal and get away with it, then I have the right to do it. Concepts like fairness or what's right and wrong, they are completely irrelevant to the equation.
And all of this leads to this core idea called objective cruelty. And what this means is that the harm they cause isn't personal to them. It's not fueled by anger or revenge. It is simply a cold, calculated, efficient tool to get a job done. Hurting you is no more emotionally significant to them than a carpenter using a hammer to drive a nail. It's just a means to an end.
So let's really break this down. Other personality types, like say a narcissist or someone with borderline traits, they might cause a lot of harm, for sure, but it often comes from their own internal pain or their fragile ego. For the antisocial con artist, the harm they inflict on you is either just an annoying, irrelevant side effect of them getting what they want, or even worse, the harm is the tool, used coldly, calculatedly, and without a single ounce of remorse.
And in the end, it's that unique cocktail, the slick charm, the purely instrumental goals, and most importantly, this cold, objective, calculated lack of remorse that makes the cruel con artist potentially the most dangerous personality type of them all. Don't go anywhere because understanding how to identify and protect yourself from this is coming right up.
All right, let's dive into a fascinating and frankly pretty unsettling world. We're going to break down the real-world playbook used by people who operate from a place of deep, deep suspicion. And these aren't just little quirks. They are structured, predictable tactics that can create absolute chaos for everyone around them. You see, for the person using them, this isn't a game. It's a fight for survival in a world they see as totally hostile.
So the very first move in this playbook is to weaponize complaints. It all starts with something incredibly small, something most of us would just brush off. A coworker grabs a coffee without asking them, or a manager replies to an email with a short-to-the-point sentence, a totally neutral event. But in their mind, that's a deliberate, personal attack packed with hidden meaning. And that one little thing kicks off this whole process, starting with them drafting this incredibly detailed, complicated complaint. From there, it moves to filing official grievances. And the endgame? Well, it's often to completely overwhelm and paralyze the very systems designed to handle this stuff, like HR departments or even the courts, just drowning them in a sea of paperwork and accusations.
And just to be super clear, we're not talking about a simple, hey, I'm not happy with this kind of email. No. These complaints are like epic novels. They are masterfully constructed stories of persecution, meticulously detailing how a bunch of totally unrelated, harmless events, a glance in the hallway, being accidentally left off a meeting invite, a tiny shift in someone's tone, are actually all connected pieces of a grand, coordinated conspiracy against them.
Now, if you're going to fuel these sprawling complaints and justify this deep-seated suspicion, you need what every prosecutor needs: evidence. And this leads us straight to the next tactic, which is this relentless, all-consuming hunt for proof.
This is where the person basically becomes a detective in their own psychological thriller, and they spend an enormous amount of time and energy on it. We're talking about saving every single email, sometimes for years, keeping these detailed logs of just casual conversations, secretly recording meetings, and hoarding any document they can possibly get their hands on. But here's the most important part. The goal isn't to find the truth. The goal is to find anything that can be twisted to fit their pre-existing belief that there's a plot against them. They're sifting through reality not for clarity, but for confirmation of their biggest fears.
And this really gets to the absolute heart of it. They are masters of distortion. A standard company memo about, say, restructuring can be held up as irrefutable proof of a secret plan to fire them specifically. A colleague's vacation request could be seen as evidence that they're plotting with management behind their back. The evidence itself is almost never actually incriminating. All the power is in their paranoid interpretation of it.
Okay, so if you genuinely believe you're surrounded by enemies who are about to strike, what's your logical next move? Well, you attack first. And this is where we see this massive disconnect from reality. In their perceived reality, they're the victim,
surrounded by threats on all sides. But in actual reality, they're often in a neutral, maybe even a supportive environment. So they conclude, I have to launch a preemptive attack to defend myself. But to everyone else, that attack just seems completely unprovoked, aggressive, and out of nowhere.
The key thing to understand here is that a preemptive attack is an offensive move against a defensive illusion. It's a sudden, often really shocking outburst, an angry email sent to the whole team, a public accusation, a tirade in the middle of a meeting. And it's all designed to neutralize a threat that, to everybody else, just isn't there. The harm they're trying to prevent is completely imaginary, but their reaction to it is very, very real.
What's so tragic about this whole playbook is where it always leads, this self-reinforcing cycle of isolation. It kicks off with their constant suspicion, which, naturally pushes people away. I mean, who wants to be around someone who is constantly accusing them of things? Eventually, friends, family, and colleagues just can't take it anymore, and they leave. But here's the twist. Their departure isn't seen as a consequence of the behavior. Oh no. It's interpreted as the final, undeniable proof that the paranoia was right all along. This just deepens their isolation, which gives the paranoia even more room to grow, creating this awful, vicious feedback loop.
This is the sound of that feedback loop snapping shut. When people finally walk away, totally exhausted and hurt, the highly suspicious person doesn't have a moment of clarity. They have a moment of validation. It's not, what did I do wrong? It's, see? I knew it. I was right not to trust them. The prophecy has been fulfilled.
This all seems so counterproductive, right? So self-destructive. It really makes you ask the biggest question of all. Why? What is the ultimate psychological goal that drives someone to systematically tear down their own social and professional life?
Because, and this is so important, this isn't just random chaos. There is a powerful, deeply ingrained psychological engine running the whole show. It's not about winning arguments or getting ahead in the way we normally think. It's about winning a war that is being fought entirely inside their own mind.
At its very, very core, their entire worldview is built on two pillars. First, a really desperate, twisted form of self-defense against a world they see as fundamentally hostile. And second, an unconscious, overwhelming need to prove their own dark prophecy about that world is absolutely correct.
And here's how that self-fulfilling prophecy works, step by step. It starts with that core belief. Everyone is hostile and they're all out to get me. That belief then dictates their actions, so they behave in a guarded, suspicious, or even hostile way. Well, that logically leads to a reaction from other people who get defensive or become cautious or just pull away. And that reaction becomes the final confirmation. Aha, see? I knew they were secretly hostile all along. They literally become the architects of their own miserable social reality. But getting this confirmation, it doesn't feel like a victory. It doesn't bring them any joy. It's just a bitter confirmation that reinforces their deepest, most painful beliefs about the world, that they are a victim, that they are truly alone, and that they are completely right to feel so resentful. They create the very world they're terrified of, over and over and over again.
This leads us right to the second part of their core motivation, which is the psychological mechanism that explains that constant simmering rage that so often comes along with this personality type.
It's a concept called justified anger. And this isn't just about feeling angry. It's the powerful, unshakable belief that they are the righteous victim of terrible injustices. This belief acts like a kind of psychological magic trick. It transforms their raw, free-floating anger into something noble, a justified reaction. And this justification is absolutely critical, because it's what gives them the moral permission to launch those preemptive attacks.
This quote just captures the mindset perfectly. It's a huge shift. The internal monologue isn't simply, I feel angry. It's, I have every single right to be this angry because of what's been done to me. And that perceived right becomes the fuel. It's the license they need to act on that anger, to file the complaint, to make the accusation, and to keep that entire cycle spinning. Don't go anywhere. The rest of the powerful insights are coming right up.
All right, today we're going to break down one of the most draining and honestly confusing personality patterns you can ever run into, the dramatic accusatory type. You totally know the feeling, right? 1 minute, everything's fine. The next, bam, you are smack in the middle of a 5-alarm emotional fire that just came out of nowhere. And you're left standing there feeling totally exhausted, confused, and maybe even a little guilty, but you have no idea why. Well, let me tell you, you are not imagining it. In this explainer, we are going to pull back the curtain and decode the playbook of what experts call the histrionic high-conflict personality. And, more importantly, we're going to give you the tools you need to step out of the chaos and get your peace of mind back. So what are we really talking about here?
The official term is the histrionic high conflict person, or HCP for short. And you've got to understand they operate from a really simple but incredibly powerful core need to be the center of attention. Their entire world, literally everything they do, revolves around getting that attention, and their main tool is big, loud, over-the-top emotions. This whole pattern is really built on 4 key pillars. First, that obsessive need for attention we just talked about. Second, their emotions are super intense and dramatic, but they're also kind of shallow and can change on a dime. Third, they might be inappropriately provocative just to get all eyes on them. And finally, and this one is so important, when they don't get what they want, they have this powerful reflex to blame and accuse other people. And this right here, this is the key to understanding everything. The single biggest fear for a histrionic HCP is being ignored. It is so terrifying to them that they would much rather be the villain in your story than not be in the story at all. To them, negative attention is a perfectly good substitute for positive attention. So, how do they actually do it? How do they create all this drama? Well, they have a pretty well-worn toolkit of tactics designed to pull you right in and put them smack in the spotlight. Let's break them down. First up, the manufactured crisis. You see, if life gets a little too quiet and that spotlight starts to drift away, they will, often unconsciously, create a full-blown crisis out of thin air just to pull everyone's focus right back where they need it to be. This might sound like a sudden, horrible illness that needs your immediate sympathy, or a huge financial emergency that needs you to drop everything and help, or some relationship disaster that has completely shattered them. The key ingredient is always urgency. It's designed to make you stop whatever you're doing and focus on them right this second. Next up is their absolute go-to move, playing the victim. This is such a powerful position for them to take. Not only does it generate a ton of sympathy and attention, but it also completely absolves them of any personal responsibility for whatever is happening. And this is just a brilliant example of how they can flip the script on you. Suddenly, the focus isn't on what they did, it's on your supposed cruelty. This kind of accusatory language is specifically designed to put you on the defensive and keep them in that safe space of being the blameless one who's suffering. You also need to pay close attention to how they talk. They almost always avoid specific details. Instead, they use this really vague, exaggerated, and emotionally loaded language. They'll say something was the worst thing that ever happened, or that someone is always so terrible. This style makes it impossible to argue with facts because they aren't using any. It's all about creating an emotional storm, not a factual conversation. Okay, so that's the problem, and man, it can feel totally overwhelming. But here's the good news, you do not have to participate. Let's shift gears and talk about your new strategy for how to engage, or maybe more accurately, how to disengage from all the drama. So the most important game-changing principle is this. You have to become a sorter. From now on, your job is to mentally separate everything they say into 2 piles, the emotional drama and the objective, boring facts. This one mindset shift changes everything. Think of this slide as your new filter, your new cheat sheet. You have to train yourself to completely ignore the column on the left, all the big emotions, the fake crises, the blame. Instead, you put 100% of your focus on the column on the right, just the objective info, the logistics, the practical solutions. You basically starve the drama and you feed the reality. Okay, so now let's get super practical. How do you actually do this when you're in the heat of the moment? Here are 2 incredibly powerful and really easy to remember methods to keep in your toolkit. First up is what's called the BIFF response, which is absolutely perfect for emails and texts. BIFF stands for brief, so you keep it short, and informative, meaning you only provide the necessary objective facts. The whole point is to completely ignore the emotional bait and focus only on the information. So for example, let's say you get a frantic 10-paragraph accusatory email about a meeting. You don't defend yourself. You don't get sucked into their feelings. You simply, calmly, and briefly state the facts. The meeting is tomorrow at 10 a.m. as scheduled. Period. Full stop. This sends a crystal clear message that drama is not going to work with you. But what if you're in a live conversation and you just need to bring the temperature down? That's where the EAR method is a lifesaver. You give them a statement of empathy, brief attention, and respect. This actually meets their underlying need to be seen and heard, but without validating the dramatic story they're trying to sell you. And this is the most important part of EAR. Your empathy is for their feeling, not for their version of the facts. So you can say, wow, I can really see you're upset about this. That validates their emotion. What you do not say is, you're so right, that's a total catastrophe, and the boss is an absolute demon. You validate the feeling, you ignore the drama. It is such a subtle but absolutely game-changing difference. So let's just recap the absolute essentials. Remember, everything they do is driven by that deep, deep fear of being ignored. The drama is just a tool to avoid that fear. Your power comes from refusing to play the game. You ignore the drama, you focus only on the facts, you use BIFF for clear, drama-free communication, and you use EAR to safely de-escalate things when you need to. And there you have it. You now have the fundamental playbook for navigating these incredibly tricky interactions. And I just want to say thank you so much for exploring these really powerful communication techniques with me today. It is truly incredible how a little bit of understanding can completely change how you navigate these tricky situations and, most importantly, protect your own peace of mind. Now, I am super curious to know which of these tools really resonates with you the most. When you think about a situation in your own life, does that straightforward, no-nonsense BIFF response feel like the perfect fit? Or is it the de-escalating power of the EAR method that you think you need? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Awesome job today. Keep learning, stay empowered, and I will catch you in the next one.